Welcome to this CNBC Africa panel at the Mining Indaba in Cape Town. I'm Chris Bishop. Now we'll be discussing the issue of green, environment and mining. Three words that often don't sit together that well, but there is a future. There are a lot of people doing a lot of work to find out how mining can become more environmentally friendly and also sustainable. Now with me, I have Kevin Fell, the Group CEO of Clean Earth, and also have Alan McKenzie, the General Manager of Mintek here in South Africa. So let's get straight into it. Guys, it's a big problem we face. I mean, the problem is with mining, as we've all agreed, it causes environmental damage, whichever way you look at it. How big is the problem, you think, here?
Well, Chris, I don't think it's unique to South Africa. The problem is global. Let's face it, mining takes a resource from the ground and leaves a hole there, and that resource is then used for society for one purpose or another. And I think the enormous challenge globally is how do you do that more responsibly? We know that society and consumers are becoming more concerned about the impact that they leave behind, and therefore they're demanding that the mining industry is more responsible in the way that it extracts the resources from the earth. So it's important, it's getting bigger, it's becoming a bigger issue to the social license to operate within the global mining industry. In South Africa, in Africa, the situation is no different because we all supply the global market.
But one good thing though, before I get to you, Kevin, is that at least at this Mining Indaba, I've been covering it for like 10 years. I've heard more serious talk about the environment here than I think I've heard all the previous ones I've been to.
Chris, if you look at the various consultancy companies, etc., that do annual studies of what the important issues are amongst mining companies, you will have seen over the last decade the environment has been moving up and up in the list, and it's now in number 1 or 2 spot. And this is really a response to society and demanding that everything they consume is done in the most environmentally friendly way possible.
So Kevin, you're based in Singapore, you're a global operation. The reason one of the reasons why you came is to talk to people is you've come up with a new way of clean, more environmentally friendly gold mining, which is very, very fashionable at the moment. There's a lot of interest and a lot of demand for gold. What exactly have you come up with?
So going back historically, there was a solution developed by the CSIRO in Australia, which is the government science laboratory. And they've done a number of pieces of work across different ore types, North America and other parts of the world, and decided that they could develop their reagent solution across all of these different ore bodies. So we partnered with them in Australia a couple of years back to collaborate in our own leases and to test this out. Where we're at now is we now have a commercial product. We're now going into full commercialization. So the whole idea of coming to Indaba was to meet with industry bodies, government agencies, and look to how we get that message out.
In a nutshell, how does it work, your way of clean gold mining?
Look, fundamentally, there's not an awful lot of difference. If you look at the front end of the plant where there's the crushing and grinding and concentration, that is very similar. Just it's more a configuration exercise. But when you start looking into the middle steps, rather than leaching through cyanide, which we know is toxic, we use our own reagent in that process, which is non-toxic. And then at the back end of the process, we have a dewatering solution, which then allows you to recycle the water, which is really important as well, as Alan and I were talking about earlier, and then go to dry tailing. So it removes the need for tailings dams, which we know is one of the major issues that we're having around the world at the moment. So we're proud that we are making a difference, and the response so far at Indaba has been quite incredible, really.
Do you think any deals might come out of this for you?
Deals themselves, probably down the track, but I think it's more relationship building and creating the awareness. We've been to a number of functions this week where we have been a part of the topic of conversation, so we're obviously getting that awareness there. We've gone to market only over the last few months, and the response has been phenomenal, and quite a number of people engaged, not necessarily in South Africa where there isn't quite that issue, but it's certainly in parts of Europe and Australia where they're a little bit more sensitive to the use of cyanide, especially mining companies that are going through feasibility and then into development, rather than the long-term people with a sunk cost in sophisticated plant and machinery.
So Alan, at Mintek, you've done a lot of work on this, and it must be very difficult. I remember many years ago writing a piece about cleaner coal, and I went on the analysts and I said I didn't think that was possible. That's how people view this thing. But how do you think South African mining, with all of its environmental challenges, can actually clean up a lot quicker in the short term here?
Chris, I think there's a number of generic areas where they can do that. The first one is energy. Burning coal to produce electricity creates a lot of greenhouse gases. So there's an enormous move towards a different energy mix. Coal is going to be there, it'll be there for a long time. But you can have a different mix with solar, you can bring some wind in, running hydrogen fuel cells, these sorts of things into the energy mix to lower that coal-derived electricity footprint. That's the one big area. The second area is in water, cleaning up the effluents, recycling water. Probably within the last decade, the standards have gone from recycling your plant water 10 times to 20 times. So, and that makes an enormous difference in the amount of water that's needed. The third area is ensuring that you don't have effluents. So removing your chemicals from the water that you do discharge, not pumping things into the air. So all of these areas, there's tremendous effort going into it at the moment, and great strides been made.
But Kevin, all of this costs money, right? A lot of the mining companies, the margins are squeezed, they're struggling for cash. How receptive do you think boards are going to be of mining companies there? Say, well, actually, good thing is we're going to help the environment. Bad thing is you're going to take a cut in your dividend next year.
Well, I think that's a really good question, and I think it's a little bit of a fallacy that we're more expensive. All the research that we've done, we're both comparative to cyanide, with the recovery rates, depending on the ore type, of course. We've got certain results that we've done in the field where we're somewhere between 40 and 60% better extraction than cyanide on certain types of ore. So I think it's going to be a business case on each one. It's not going to be a blanket change, but like I said, the response that we're getting in some of the business cases that we've been discussing has been really promising.
Well, I think some of the small-scale miners, that's as well something that comes into my mind. Some of the junior miners who were talking just yesterday about their woes and what have you here, and the fact that for them it's a big expense, this kind of thing, clearing up. It's a big expense trying to limit the amount of pollution you put out, and it's probably the last thing on their minds. How can we change that?
Chris, you're quite right, but what people haven't done before is to look at the total cost of ownership of a particular process. And society is changing in that sense. Of course it's cheaper to pump your effluent into the local river, but it's not responsible. And people are clamping down on it. I mean, we know, for instance, that one of the reasons that China got a large step ahead in many metals was because they had laxer environmental control so that they could produce for cheaper. That has now changed. Even in China it's changed. The world is a changing place. People are demanding greater responsibility. Yes, it costs more, and yes, those people that are trying to come in at the lower end of the market are going to experience this as a greater barrier to entry. But I make no apologies to society demanding that things are done in a more responsible and environmentally friendly manner. It's the right thing to be doing. There's consequences, and that's, unfortunately, we'll have to live with.
I mean, Kevin, you're in the private sector.
Yes.
But I mean, what about the argument? I mean, I've spoken to the government many times about this environmental issue, and they say, no, as far as we're concerned, the miners should clear it up, the miners should sort it out. They're the ones who make the money, they're the ones they should do it. But don't you think that's a little bit short-sighted? There needs to be more state intervention and money spent on it?
There needs to be a lot more collaboration, I think. I think as part of the feasibility study and the environmental studies that go on with that, I think there needs to be a plan, and those do need to be actioned. But I think the government also needs to make a play on that as well, and it is a collaboration. But the response that we've got so far from governments is great. And one of the issues that's happened up until now is they haven't seen a clear alternative, and so they haven't forced some of these regulations. And now that things like our solution are starting to come out, that they're starting to have a little bit more confidence in pushing back. But I agree with you, Chris, that there needs to be a lot more collaboration.
I'm afraid we're running out of time now, but Alan, just a quick last comment. Do you think the way forward with this environmental thing, do you think this time next year at the Mining Indaba there's going to be whole sections taken up by environmental concerns?
I'm sure it will, because it's one of the growing hot topics. So it's not going to get less. I think you're quite right, there does need to be more collaboration. I think government is involved. I come from a government agency, a government entity. We've done an awful lot of work on this in support of the sector. But I think Kevin is also right. There have to be meaningful alternatives.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Alan McKenzie, the General Manager of Mintek, and Kevin Fell, the CEO of Clean Earth. That's the end of our discussion here on cleaner, greener mining in Africa.